For too long, immigration has been too high.
You will be deported, except in very exceptional circumstances, but you can expect to be deported, and we're going to make that absolutely clear in our law.
Britain's immigration policies have been dubbed some of the harshest in Europe.
It was a very, very aggressive policy towards illegal immigrants.
There were some who saw it, I shan't name them, as almost reminiscent of Nazi Germany in the way it's working.
In an attempt to force migrants out the country, the government have brought the police into immigration enforcement.
Immigration control has basically extended its hands or its reach into all areas of life.
This means if a migrant approaches the police for help, they risk being treated as an immigration offender rather than as a victim.
They didn't protect her.
But what does this mean for migrants who are victims of abuse, trafficking and exploitation who did not choose to be in this country illegally?
I became rough homeless with a child.
Some say these women are being failed by the police.
She immediately presented to me as someone who should not be in detention.
But the police say that these new laws put them in a difficult position.
The difficulty for the police services is that we have to uphold immigration law as well.
Is the hostile environment forcing the police to neglect their duty to protect victims of crime?
The function of the police is to protect, is to investigate crime, and which is the more serious crime.
And what effect is this having on one of the UK's most vulnerable groups of women?
For me, it's better to die than to call the police.
Sarah was trafficked to the UK in 2018. Because her abuser brought her here illegally, using somebody else's passport, she was an undocumented migrant.
He brought me here with his sister's passport. Every day he was beating me, and I was cleaning, cooking for him, and he was taking drugs and drinking the alcohol, and he beat me every day, closed the door. He beat me with belt, stick, and one day he beat me lots, and I left the house.
After enduring 3 months of severe abuse and exploitation, Sarah managed to escape and go to the police.
I said, I left the house because the man, he's going to kill me. And I was half flesh in my body. He beat me with a belt and sticking cable for the TV.
But when the police realised she was undocumented, they shared her data with the Home Office. Within 24 hours, she was arrested as an illegal immigrant and put in a detention centre.
When they understood everything about him, they said, "You're going to have to go in prison." I said, "How?" They said, "You have to go because you came here illegally." I said, "I didn't come in by myself. The man brought me here by force." They took me into the prison. I have never been in prison. First time. The room was very small. A dog would be treated better than me. Same as a criminal, the victim. They treat me the same as a criminal.
Sarah is not alone. 18% of migrant women who report crimes of abuse are arrested because of their immigration status. In 2012, the Conservative government introduced a new set of immigration policies known as the hostile environment.
This is part of the proposals we've got to make it harder for illegal immigrants to be here in the UK.
The hostile environment made it incredibly difficult for undocumented migrants to live in the UK by stopping them from working, accessing healthcare, opening a bank account, or renting a house. Under the hostile environment, police officers, landlords and healthcare workers all gather a migrant's immigration status data. The Home Office can then use this to detain and deport them. Since the hostile environment was created, the number of migrant women who have been deported after reporting their abuse has risen from 12% to 30%. So how does the hostile environment trap vulnerable migrants in abusive situations? What impact is this having on those affected? And what needs to be done to fix it? The Latin American Women's Rights Service work with women who are experiencing abuse. Through their work, they have identified how abusers can use the hostile environment and the threat of deportation to gain control over their victims. I've come to speak with Elizabeth Jimenez, the policy officer at the charity, to understand how this works.
A particular form of abuse that migrant women face is the use of their status to, as I mentioned, threat them with deportation, with detention, and in the case of victims of domestic abuse and other forms of abuse, separate them from their children, for instance. The fact that perpetrators know that they can use the status to coerce and control women gives them the power to say, if you want to leave, if you want to seek for help, I'll be calling the Home Office, I'll be letting them know that our relationship has break up, and that you need to go back to your country, they will deport you.
62% of undocumented migrant women experiencing domestic abuse are told by their perpetrators that they will be deported if they report the crime. But Elizabeth says this isn't just an empty threat.
This fear is not isolated, but it's based on real data sharing agreements between police and the Home Office.
Elizabeth introduced me to Jill, one of the survivors that the charity helps. She came to the UK legally with her partner and children on a spouse visa. But when the visa ran out, Jill's partner hid her passport so that she couldn't renew it. In doing so, he purposely forced Jill into being undocumented. He then used this to abuse and control her.
He came to me saying, you have no right in this country. And if you want to have this family built properly, follow my rules, or the police will inform the immigration and you'll be deported.
So he threatened that he would call the police if you stepped out of line?
In the time that we have our discussions, the argument, he used that.
Jill went to the police to report her abuse, but because she was undocumented, she was told to self-deport back to Brazil and to leave her child in the UK with her abuser.
And when I get in, I start to share my story. The first thing they said, so what do you think about getting the hotel so you have a night to spend, and then tomorrow you seek help in your embassy or in the Home Office, and then you go back home?
So their first recommendation was about you and your immigration status and not about the abuse that you just endured.
See my point? No one is asking him what he did. So as a victim, I need to prove that I am victim.
Elizabeth says that many migrant women feel trapped in similar situations.
So how the hostile environment play is that it's police believing that they don't have any obligation or they don't have any duty to protect this group of victims, that they are undeserving of protection. That's what the hostile environment and the narrative is creating, right? They didn't protect her. Her safeguarding was not priority. I mean, if you have a victim in front of you, the immigration status is not the first thing you have to ask about. You have to ask if she's safe, if she needs help, what if she was at risk? I mean, they only saw her as a migrant woman, undeserving of protection. And this is something that, as I said before, not only happened to Jill, it happens to many service users we have in here.
I've come to Exeter to talk to Detective Superintendent Sean Sturland. He's the unit commander for the Modern Slavery and Organised Immigration Crime Unit in the police.
We're here.
I want to speak to him about what the police are doing to protect migrant victims of abuse and to target their perpetrators.
I truly believe that every police officer, when encountering a victim, has at the forefront of their mind, what can I do to make sure that this person is dealt with fairly, and the response to them being a victim of crime is the best they possibly can be. Despite that, though, occasionally the response is not what we would hope for.
So do the police acknowledge that they could be doing some things better and that they do sometimes let down victims?
Very occasionally, and with great regret, there are occasions in which, as I mentioned before, a mistake will be made. Someone will make a decision which, in hindsight, was the wrong one to make at that time, and a victim will feel that they're let down. We try our hardest to ensure that that is as rare as it possibly can be, and also to work with that victim to try and do whatever we can to help and support them going forward once they've let us know that, and to learn from it and try and make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Domestic abuse charity Southall Black Sisters have been working to make sure that migrants feel supported by the police. They want to see changes made within the police force so that victims feel safe to report crime. In 2018, Southall Black Sisters launched a super complaint against the police with human rights solicitors Liberty. Now, it says here that a super complaint can be used by an organisation to highlight harmful trends they see in policing and incite positive change.
Hi, Janae.
I went to speak to Janaea, who works for Southall Black Sisters, to find out more.
Our police super complaint is calling for a complete separation between police and the Home Office so that victims and witnesses of crime, particularly victims of domestic abuse, can report violence or any abuse that they're experiencing without the fear that immigration enforcement action will be taken against them.
The charity says that data sharing is stopping victims from reporting these crimes because if they do, they will be arrested over their immigration status.
What we term the hostile or the compliant environment from the Home Office has really created a climate of fear for undocumented migrants. Immigration control has basically extended its hands or its reach into all areas of life, and what this means is that for migrant women and others with insecure immigration status, there's a real fear about what the consequences might be if they reach out for support or for assistance.
Southall Black Sisters are calling for an end to data sharing between the Home Office and the police. They say that until this happens, migrant victims will be trapped in vulnerable situations.
A lot of the avenues that we would hope are open to victims of gender-based violence are then closed off to them, and it puts them in a really dangerous and precarious situation because it leaves them really exposed to further re-victimisation and further harm.
So how are the police told to treat migrant victims of crime? In response to the super complaint, the police updated their guidelines for how they should treat migrant victims of crime. But the charities say that it's still not enough because it doesn't stop data sharing. I've come to Flex, a charity that works to prevent exploitation. I'm hoping they can explain the police guidance to me. So what is it that we're looking at and what does the NPCC stand for?
So the NPCC is the National Police Chiefs Council, and this is the 2020 guidance on how the police should share information with immigration enforcement. So it sets out what police forces across the UK should be doing. So this guidance is from April last year, and it substituted one from 2018 that said that when the police came across someone that had insecure status, they should first and foremost treat them as a victim first and support them. And if they became aware that they were undocumented or had insecure status, it was appropriate for them to share that information with the Home Office. What this new guidance does is that it says when someone is suspected by an officer of being an immigration offender, so as having potentially insecure immigration status, the police will share information about them with the Home Office. So this guidance has actually made it worse because it's now saying that if someone that has insecure status comes to the police, their information will be shared with the Home Office and therefore makes people even more fearful of coming forward.
The consequences of police data sharing span further than just making migrants afraid to report crime. Saleha says that Sarah has been left with lasting trauma from the treatment she endured after going to the police.
She's just still very distrustful. suffers from complex PTSD, depression and anxiety, not just from her trafficking experience, but from what happened afterwards, her arrest, her detention in the immigration centre, being locked up for a month, being, treated as someone who had done something wrong, when the reason why she had been an illegal entrant was because she was trafficked here. It wasn't something that she had chose to do. She was forced to enter the UK unlawfully.
I don't want to see police never in my life, because I have bad experience and they treat me very bad. I'm not feeling safe. I can't say I'm safe 100% because he's free.
Saleha worked out that you had been trafficked and they had misunderstood your entire case. So how did it feel when she worked that out and managed to get you out of the deportation centre?
When something is true and no one believes it's very painful. But then Suhaila believed me, and it's very when someone believes your story, it's very helpful, because I know she's going to save my life. But the police and immigration, they don't care. I hate the police and the immigration here because they treat me criminal.
Saleha says that the hostile environment is making the police see migrant victims first and foremost as immigration offenders.
Everything is viewed with the immigration lens on, so when someone is presenting as a victim of trafficking or a victim of crime or a victim of domestic violence, they're not treated as that first. They're treated as an illegal entrant or an overstayer, and they're then subjected to further abuse and trauma, worse in some cases than what they had originally gone through from their traffickers.
So how else does prioritising immigration affect the police's ability to protect victims? Liberty lawyer Lara says that immigration enforcement priorities are distracting the police from their primary safeguarding duty.
So, in other words, I think they are focusing on the wrong thing. They're not asking themselves the right question. What is my primary function? Is not the police function to do immigration control. So why are they passing the information? The Home Office is simply acting on that information. And I don't think that what they're doing is right, but it's more akin to their function than it is to the police. We would say that this is inconsistent with what they see, but is not their duty to assist the Home Office.
The difficulty for the police services is that we have to uphold immigration law as well. And so whilst we absolutely want to deal with people as victims of crime, we want to investigate that crime, we want to safeguard them, we want to make, start their recovery process, we can't ignore the fact that they may be an immigration offender as well.
A quarter of migrant women who report crimes of abuse to the police describe being denied support because of their immigration status. Sophie is a survivor of sex trafficking. Despite going to the police over a year ago, her case has still not been investigated. Her abuser remains free, while she lives in fear.
After 1 year, somebody replied, say, "Oh, I saw your missed call, I saw your message. I'm sorry, because when the case come to my table, I was pregnant, I was due to go for maternity leave. I was thinking my colleague take over the case. I never know she abandoned the file. She never opened the file. So we are trying to go on CCTV, everything is already wiped."
Why do you think that the police didn't take your case seriously?
I don't know whether, even if she's going to maternity leave, she's not the only one working in the office. Other people is there to pick up the case because they don't understand the pain someone was going through. It's so sad.
How does it affect your life now?
Who will be there for me? Who will save me? Who will fight for me? Because he do what he did, he goes scot-free.
Sophie is not alone. 54% of migrant women fear that they wouldn't be believed by the police because of their immigration status, and more than half feel that the police or the Home Office would support their perpetrator over them.
Getting consistency across tens of thousands of different officers in 43 different police forces is difficult, And police officers are people like everybody else, and sometimes they might not follow the right procedure or they might make a mistake. We regret every single one of those instances, but it does happen, and it's hard to eliminate. You know, perfection is something that we aspire to, but realistically we're not going to get.
It's not just the police who are encouraged to enforce immigration through the hostile environment. In 2016, the Home Office requested the data of 9,000 hospital patients, and as a result, roughly 6,000 were traced by immigration enforcement. I spoke to Marta, a nurse at University College London Hospital, about how the hostile environment impacts the NHS.
We are unawarely being complicit of this hostile environment because every data that we are putting to look after our patients could be shared at any time. So this is basically not only deterring people from seeking care, but it's also making us impossible for us to provide care ethically.
And how does that make you feel as a nurse working in the NHS?
Well, it makes me feel very upset because that's not the NHS I signed up for. I do believe in universal healthcare.
I'm meeting Gloria, who came to the UK with her husband. She is a survivor of female genital mutilation and is now seeking asylum in order to stop her children from going through the same trauma she did. She told me she had some stories which will help explain why some undocumented migrants fear seeking healthcare.
I have a friend, this is very, very sad. She went to the hospital to have a baby, but because she was a asylum seeker and she didn't have a status, right there at the hospital, immigration officers came to pick her up and they took her to detention center, and before you know it, she was sent back home with the baby.
After just giving birth?
After just giving birth. She didn't come here illegally. She came with a complete visa. After hearing that kind of story, everybody was like, oh God, I'm going to be in trouble. If I go there, who will I meet? What will they tell me? Is this going to be my end?
One bad story can stop 100 people.
Yes. People are afraid to go to GPs. People are afraid to go to the hospital. It's just too much. It's too much and it's bad. It doesn't have to be this way. They can do better.
The Super Complaint is calling for the police and the Home Office to improve how migrant victims of crime are treated. They say that a data firewall is needed between the police and the Home Office. This would separate police work from immigration enforcement by blocking a migrant's immigration status from being passed on.
Our preference would be for a firewall between the police and the Home Office, but also other statutory services, so that all victims and witnesses of crime, all migrant victims of domestic abuse can come forward without fear that they will be detained, deported, separated from their children and subject to further harm.
It's going to send a clear message to migrants that they are safe in reporting crime. And that is going to mean that more people are going to be sent to prison as a result.
I want to know how a firewall could work on a national scale, so I've been looking into immigration policies in different countries. In America, they use what's called an enhanced collaborative model. It completely separates the police from immigration enforcement so that migrants feel safe coming forward to report crime. Hi, Paul.
I'm calling Paul Chang, a former Labour inspector in America, to find out the benefits of this approach.
First part is we want to encourage victims to come forward, that to trust the police, that they will not be re-victimized by the law enforcement. The government is here to protect you.
Aside from protecting victims, why else is it important to work with them?
No matter how many people you arrest, if you keep arresting the victims and not do anything about the guys that actually run the human trafficking network, you're still leaving in the infrastructure. You got to take down the infrastructure, not taking out the victims.
And can survivors work with the police to build trust in migrant communities?
You have to establish that core group of survivors who are no longer victims, but who are survivors now, who can now be your ambassadors to say, hey, it's okay to trust law enforcement because, this is why you can trust. Look at me today.
But is it possible for the UK to adopt a similar approach?
Hi, I was wondering if I could speak to somebody in the Home Office about the official government response to the super complaint in regards to police data sharing. Okay, thank you. Bye. So I've just spoken to the Home Office press team again to ask if they'll have an interview with me, but they've said that they can't say anything until they release their official response to the super complaints. So what I've done instead is I've contacted someone who worked closely with the Home Office for a number of years and hoping he might be able to give me some answers.
Sir David Metcalfe was Director of Labour Market Enforcement. A lot of his work involved dealing with undocumented and trafficked migrants. I wanted to speak to him about why he thinks the British government hasn't put a firewall in place to protect migrant victims of crime.
A complete firewall, I think, is probably pretty much impossible. You've got to remember that the Home Office has got a terrifically difficult job to do, balancing act between sort of properly enforcing the law, but also helping the victims. And I just think this is a very difficult job. There's a tension between the two, and it's a matter of trying to get the balance right. I'm not actually sure that a complete firewall is the solution to that.
The government was due to respond to the super complaint in June, but the deadline has been extended. The police say that they will support their decision.
If it's decided that the best thing and the easiest thing and the most consistent way is a firewall, and clearly that will be something decided about by the Home Office as part of their review, then of course the police will work with them in order to implement that.
What happened to these women cannot be undone.
I feel so sad. Anytime I think about that, sometimes I try not to remember, but sometimes it keeps coming.
And to this day, none of their perpetrators have been charged.
But he is free. They arrested the victim and the criminal is free.
While data sharing remains, the experts say that these women will not be the last to fall victim to the system.
I've had anonymous calls from clients saying I'm a victim of rape, but I don't want to tell the police because they're going to tell the Home Office.
But these survivors remain hopeful that their stories will help incite change.
What I have voice and now brave enough to show face.